So I'm just going to do a quick video about tuning a two-stroke engine, and I would like to explain to you all what you're doing when you tune a two-stroke engine. So in order for an engine to run right, you need approximately 14.7 parts of air to 1 part of fuel. And the carburetor's job is to essentially match the correct amount of fuel with the incoming amount of air. The air is controlled by the trigger and the throttle here as you pull the trigger, and the fuel is controlled by the carburetor. Now, you'll notice when the throttle is closed like this, there is a small hole right there. So it's at 12 o'clock just beneath the screw in the aluminum. And that right there is where the fuel comes up and out when you're idling. And if you look here, that in front of my thumb, that screw is what controls how big that passageway is. On the other side here, you have the second screw, which controls the size of the passage to a different hole down in the throat of the throttle, which is hard to show you. And that controls your fuel mixture when you're running wide open throttle or in between. When we tighten the screws, we make the passageway smaller, we allow less fuel in, and the engine begins to run what we call lean. When you loosen the screws, you make the passageway bigger, more fuel can flow, and you make the passageway, and the engine begins to run rich. Now, running too rich is not a good thing, and running too lean is not a good thing. In either case, at some point the engine won't run. The EPA likes for engines to run lean because they pollute more. The problem with running lean is engines run hotter, and they don't get as much lubrication from the two-stroke oil, and they are more likely to fail in the long run with wear and tear. And so regardless of your stance on the environment and pollution, what I would say is it's not good to run an engine so lean that it pollutes less, but it's more likely to fail and be thrown into the landfill. It's not good for the consumer spending money. It's not good for the manufacturing processes to manufacture more stuff because it's broken. It's not good for the landfill. So in order to keep customers from messing with these screws, the different manufacturers come up with special screws. In this case, Husqvarna 21 splined screws, which most people aren't going to have lying around their garage. You can get these screwdrivers on Amazon. Just type in carburetor adjustment tools. You'll find kits for 10 bucks. Now, sometimes these screws are labeled L and H for low and high, meaning low RPM and high RPM. In this case, they're not, but it doesn't matter because you can always know which is which because the screw closest to the engine is always your low speed adjustment screw. And that's for exactly the same reason that I showed you here. When the throttle's closed at idle, you have this one little hole being exposed, and that's the one you want to control your idle. The one closest to the air filter here, this one, is your off idle or your wide open throttle screw. It's always the same on every two-stroke. So as long as you can identify what side the air filter's on, then the one closest to the air filter is your off idle adjustment screw. Now, we're gonna adjust this a little richer than it came from the factory to increase the longevity of the machine. And the way we're gonna do that is we're going to richen up the mixture until the machine starts to do something that we call four-stroking. And that means it's basically trying to fire twice as often as it should. And you can hear that. I'm gonna start the machine, put it into wide open throttle, and I'm going to turn the adjustment screw 1/4 to the left. And you'll hear the difference. When you're tuning carburetors, it normally doesn't take more than half a turn to do anything. And so I'm gonna show you what that looks like. I gotta put the phone down to start it. I'll start it, and then I'll let it run for a few moments. I'll turn it 1/4 turn to the left, you'll hear it 4-stroke. I'll turn it 1/4 turn to the right, you'll hear the 4-stroke and go away. All right, here we go. find that sweet spot where you can turn the four-stroking on and off. And you want, the machine needs to be very warm because that's how you're gonna be using it. You don't wanna try and tune a cold machine. And you basically richen it until it four-strokes and then start to lean it out until the four-stroking goes away. Now, if this were a chainsaw, it would be a little bit different, and I'll just explain that briefly. When you're blowing leaves at wide open throttle, the load on the machine doesn't change. It doesn't matter if you're blowing into the air or towards leaves, the load on the machine doesn't change because the load on the machine is dictated by this fan blade spinning. But a chainsaw is different. When a chainsaw is at wide open throttle and not in a piece of wood, there's almost no load. Just like there's less load on a truck if you're not towing something. As soon as you begin to put the chainsaw into the wood, you have a huge load. And so the way you tune a chainsaw is you richen it until it just starts to four-stroke. And you leave it that way at wide open throttle. And then you confirm that as soon as the chain hits the wood and you start cutting, the four-stroking should go away. And what that does is it gives you the same tune under full load. Because there's no point in tuning a saw to run wide open throttle, the chain just running around the bar, nothing in, no load on the saw. That's not how you use it. But a leaf blower is different. So keep that in mind. Good luck and have fun.